in a solid stream. I felt like I was going the wrong way down a one-way street. Inside, officers and detectives were literally running up and down the halls. It was as close to an all-out mobilization as I'd ever seen. I went straight to the Joint Operations Conference Center. More chaos on a very large scale, phones ringing everywhere, briefings happening on a rolling basis. I found two guys from my squad, Jerry Winthrop and Aaron Getz, standing off to the side, waiting for orders. "Fatalities?" I said to Jerry. "You heard?" He shook his head. No, Alex. Everything's nuts, as you can see. We're waiting to hear where to go. Fucking water supply." At the front of the large room, Raymond Davies, the superintendent of detectives, was on his phone. Standing next to him were Jocelyn Kilbourne from MPD's Internal Homeland Security Branch and Hector Nunez from Special Operations, plus a few other unfamiliar faces. "Who are the suits up front?" I said. "EPA on the left," Jerry said, "interior by the door. And don't ask who's in charge because I don't think anybody knows yet." As soon as Davies was off the phone, he waved his arms to get the room's attention. "Listen up. We just got word from the Bryant Street pumping station over by McMillan Reservoir. They found signs of tampering on one of their lines. Whatever happened over there, it was no accident." "What kind of tampering?" someone called out. It was the question I had. Davies took a breath, then answered. "This does not leave this room. Handmade dispersal devices, presumably to leach whatever poison this was into the system. It seems to be contained in the 2nd High Water District. That's between Eastern Avenue and Rock Creek. The other districts are clear so far. We've got emergency testing going everywhere, expanded security at all processing facilities." Davies handed it over to Assistant Chief Kilbourne. She pulled up a quick PowerPoint and ran everybody through a list of contingencies. Some were immediate and practical, others were theoretical, from citywide water shutdowns to looting and riot control, even municipal evacuation plans and declarations of martial law. This sure looked like the big one that everybody was always worried about. "No one's saying any of these emergency protocols are going to become necessary," Kilbourne told us. "We don't even know if this is terror-related, but it's essential that everyone knows what to do if or when things go south." In other words, we were on the verge of uncharted territory. On paper, we were ready for anything. All kinds of emergency preparedness systems had been put into place in the years since 9/11, with every work group, simulation, and special training the department could throw at it. But the thing no one ever wanted to talk about was that there were some emergency situations you couldn't possibly prepare for, because you just couldn't imagine them happening. Chapter 26. I left the room feeling like I was still basically unassigned, and also at a real crossroads on the Coyle case. I needed to know if I could accomplish something, and also whether the kidnapping of the president's kids could possibly be connected to the water supply emergency. The possibility had been raised by the FBI and the CIA. It was one of the first things I thought of when I heard about the reservoir problem. I walked out to a stairwell for some quiet. Then I dialed Ned Mahoney's number. When he didn't pick up, I kept going, down to the parking garage. I got in my car and drove to Ned's little Cape house in Falls Church, Virginia. If he was going to play hard to get, I was going to have to become more irresistible. I'd been out to Ned's for the occasional barbecue, but when Amy Mahoney saw me standing on her front porch, her eyes opened wide. "Alex, what's going on?" "Nothing's wrong," I said right away, which wasn't exactly the truth. "I'm just trying to track Ned down. I need to talk with him, Amy." She looked relieved. Ned heads up the hostage rescue team out of Quantico, and it's not just him who lives with the stress of that job. "Come on in," Amy said. She pecked me on the cheek as I stepped past the screen door. "I'll call him right now." I stood in their foyer feeling a little awkward, a little embarrassed. This wasn't exactly an above-board maneuver, but it had to be done. A minute later, Amy had Ned on the phone. "Hey, hon, it's me. I've got Alex Cross here. He's looking for you. You have a second?" I'm not sure what Ned said next, but I could hear the tone of it. It was Amy who looked embarrassed now. I held out my hand for the phone, and Ned was still railing when I took it. "Kicking my ass, and I don't need to tell you, Ned," I said. "It's me." "Alex? Sorry about this." "Jesus, you're killing me here." "Then it's mutual," I said. "Just tell me I'm in the dark on the Coyle case for a good reason. I'll trust your word, but I'm lost here, and there are plenty of other places I could be today." Yeah, like someone else's house, he said. Ned, Washington is in the middle of an emergency. My kids are home from school. It's scary as hell. They got to the water supply, maybe to the president's kids. At first he didn't answer. Then it was just, I don't know what to tell you. It's not exactly what I was looking for, I said. I need you to tell me something, Ned. Alex, what do you want me to say? They're compartmentalizing the shit out of this thing, he said. I doubt I've got much more intel than you do at this point. Ned and I have known each other a long time. We've been through some impossible situations and done some off-the-record favors for each other, too. So it was strange and kind of hurtful trying to gain his trust now. I told him as much. There was a pause. I heard Ned take a deep breath on the other end. This whole thing was making me feel bad, talking to him this way, coming out to his house, using Amy. Listen, I gotta go, he said. I have a conference call waiting. Ned, just hang in there. Don't hang up, I said. But he already had. If it had been my own phone in my hand, it probably would have gone sailing. When I turned around, Amy was staring, looking like she might start to cry. You look like you wanted to reach right through the phone and strangle him, she said. No, I said. Don't mind me, Why was I ready to punch a hole in my friend's wall? What was it that I wanted to do here? I just want those kids to be found, I said. That's all I care about, Amy.
Chapter 27. He was definitely going to write a big, fat book on this someday, when it was all far, far behind him. And not the way everyone and his brother-in-law says they're going to write a book someday. He was really going to do it. Record.
It wasn't that Zoe and Ethan did anything wrong themselves. They just happened to be born into the wrong family at the wrong time. None of this was their fault any more than it's your fault or mine. Maybe it goes without saying, but someone has to play the sacrificial lamb. History tells us that much. Every tragedy has repercussions.
Stop. That actually sounded half decent to him. Important. Had a ring of truth. He was getting the hang of this now. Maybe there was even a title in there. Sacrificial Lambs? Possibly, although he still kind of liked Suffer the Little Children, as in those who come unto me. But that wasn't a decision he had to make today. The book wasn't even written yet. Hell, the story wasn't even told yet, wasn't finished. There was still plenty of time for the peripheral details to work themselves out. So far, he had the beginning, and he had the end. Record.
The juice boxes come in a 3-pack for $1.99 at the Safeway, 2 blocks from my house. The Rohypnol's a little harder to come by, of course, but it's not impossible if you know where to look. 2 milligrams every 12 hours seems to do the trick beautifully. They're so out of it. I'm not even sure they know what's going on.
Stop. Maybe nobody would care about the Safeway part, but whatever. Tape was cheap as dirt. He'd just keep throwing everything down and sift through it later. The blank cassettes could live in the glove compartment of his vehicle. The used ones he kept where no one would ever find them, just like Ethan and Zoe. Meanwhile, the light was getting long outside. He needed to start moving if he wanted to get back to the car by dark, which he definitely did. From the seat next to him, he pocketed 2 of the juice boxes, the ones with Scotch tape covering the tiny hole the syringe had left. The 3rd box he'd drink on the way. It was an hour through the woods and an hour back to his house if he kept up a good strong pace, which he would. He was in excellent physical shape. He got out and took the recurve bow from the trunk, along with a leather quiver of arrows. Deer season was still 6 weeks off, but rabbits and squirrels were always fair game. More than that, the hunting thing was a good excuse for being all the way out here in the first place. Not that anyone came around these woods much, but it didn't cost anything extra to be careful. Record.
That's another thing. The FBI hasn't said word one about my little note. So, just in case it's not already clear, none of this has ever been about money. Not taking the kids, and not the book either. I mean, it's not like I'm going to be able to collect royalties when this thing's done. I'll just have to buy it at the Barnes & Noble or Walmart like everybody else.
Stop. Record.
It's gonna be one hell of a story. It really is. Just you wait and see.
Stop. Book 2. Alphabet Soup. Chapter 28. At 555 feet, the Washington Monument towers majestically over the National Mall. Completed in December of 1884, it was formally dedicated on... Holla tried to tune out the tremendously irritating pre-recorded propaganda and other drivel as their tour bus rolled down Independence Avenue. It sounded like the tires of the bus were sticking to the littered street. Everything seemed dirty. What a disgusting city. And yet everywhere you looked, there was another hulking monument to American arrogance and power. It was ironic, really. She hadn't learned to truly hate this country until she'd come here for her education. 4 years at Penn, and what had it taught her? Only that the United States was just about the biggest failed experiment in human history. As we cross the bridge toward Arlington, you can look back and see the Tidal Basin and the Jefferson Memorial. She looked down instead at the tourmobile brochure on her lap. It had been slipped under her hotel room door with a few instructions. When the tour bus reached Arlington National Cemetery, they were to get off, and guess what? Here they were. Tariq stood in the aisle, shifting from foot to foot. He looked odd, but oddly handsome this morning, with a Baltimore Ravens cap shading his freshly clean-shaven face. Holla's own hair was now in a blunt cut around the nape of her neck and dyed as close to auburn as she'd been able to get it. She was still pretty, though, and she did like that about herself. Absolutely no ball cap for her. Please watch your step and enjoy your visit to Arlington National Cemetery. They milled off the bus with the other tourists onto a plaza in front of the white stucco and limestone visitors center. Holla looked around, unsure about what to expect next. Almost right away, a familiar face emerged from out of the crowd. It was the hippie girl from the museum. She was carrying the same brightly colored woven bag, probably so that Holla would recognize her right away. There was no dance this time, no slow approach. As soon as they'd seen each other, the girl came over and stood next to them as if they were all waiting for the same bus. "Hey, could I borrow your map for a sec?" she said. "Of course, no bother." This girl was good, actually, very natural and fearless. Holla watched closely and still barely saw the disc as it came out of her bag. What would it be this time? A high-rise in the heart of Washington? A government building? Another utility? More important eliminations? Kidnapping? "Thanks a lot," said the girl. "No problem. Have a nice day." The whole exchange was as quick as it was seamless. If anything, there was just the hint of a knowing smile on the girl's face before she turned away. The mission was gaining momentum. The excitement was palpable between them, though only for a moment of shared expectations. "Come on," Alice said. Another red, white, and blue tourmobile was pulling into the plaza. She took Tariq's hand and started walking in the opposite direction. "Where are we going?" he said. "The tour buses are over there." "To find a cab. If I have to get back on that bus for one more minute, I'm going to kill someone right here."
Chapter 29. My car was quickly becoming my office these days, and there was no way around it. I was shuttling between some ongoing casework I wasn't ready to drop and the coil interviews that the Bureau kept sending my way in a steady trickle. Most days I worked with Sampson, but now and then I was on my own. The Dragon Slayer. I kept myself updated on the fly, usually with a phone pressed against my ear, since my Bluetooth was on the fritz, and who had time to go to Best Buy these days? "So what's the lab saying? They must have something," I asked. I had my old buddy Jerry Winthrop on the line. He'd been my inside source on the water scare. The rest I got like everybody else, from CNN and the internet. So far, 2 people had died, and the city was close to a panic state. Sampson was off checking other water sources today. "Looks like the 2nd District line was tainted with high-grade potassium cyanide," he said. "Isn't that—" "Yeah, it is. Same thing that killed the 2 suicides out at Dulles. What a coincidence." And no one's taken responsibility?